I said they.
Okay, I'll call the meeting of the Morrow County Clean Water Consortium to order. And our first order of business would be some minutes from July 8th, 2025 meeting. So we have a chance to check those over.
Look at the meeting.
Could you flip on there who all's on with us?
It's done another update, so it's gotten weird again,
Okay,
but
It
let's see.
should be an introduction.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah. Looks like, not everybody we know. Okay. Do I hear a motion to approve the July 8th minutes?
I'll motion to approve the July minutes as presented.
Okay.
A second.
Then moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Okay. And our first business item would be consultant presentation, grant funding options, County Consortium. Nick is here for us.
Yeah, where do you want me? You want me up here, just sit here?
I think you're fine there.
Just fine here? Okay.
Yeah. Well, those guys can't see, I guess, but is it, you're gonna be mostly your presentation?
Watch me up there.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Just to do a brief introduction, I'm Nicholas Ducote, go by Nick. This is my company's going on 10th year, doing mostly water and sewer infrastructure throughout Eastern Oregon, all the way from Ontario to here down to Burns and Grant County. So I'm really excited to be able to jump into this. Me and Tamara and Matt have been kind of rapping and brainstorming on this topic since probably March is when I first kind of started ruminating on all this. So I'm glad to be able to jump in, to be able to answer some questions that I know have come up kind of meeting after meeting about funding and where this is going and what grants are out there, and everybody has questions. So the hope is really to just get everybody on the same page with 2 PowerPoints the next 2 months, but also invite a lot of discussion. So if there's something up or something I say or something on the screen you got a question about, let's just talk about it. I'm hopeful that, you know, as much as anyone might learn, that it also just gives you guys a real good path forward on where to take decision making, where to set priorities, how to set priorities, and what to do with moving some of these infrastructure projects forward. Let's jump to that next page. So the basic roadmap that I've been coordinating with Matt is just these next 3 meetings. Today is just a presentation to get everybody on the same page about different kinds of funding, terminology, and just what the landscape looks like. Meeting 2, the idea is to move kind of from this vague area to more, what does it look like to develop projects, to develop eligible projects and competitive projects to apply for grant or loan funding. And then the 3rd meeting, not necessarily nailed down in stone, but the idea is to move through these and then to be able to, for the board here to give me direction on what I should be working on next. And also, you know, Ronan GSI or any other consultants that the consortium brings on board, kind of giving us a direction and some priorities to work on. So the goals of this effort, trying to direct consultant staff, develop scopes of work for us and what we're supposed to be focusing on and working on. I'll take a lot of this feedback and information, and you know, once I know what the focus is, I'll be putting together a funding strategy report. So going through different project ideas, different grant and loan options, and really just trying to drill down into some of the different ways that we can slice and dice up, you know, what is a very large and intimidating regional project. So I assume eventually the goal is to apply for grants to further fund infrastructure projects. And then along with the overall roadmap project, you know, kind of integrating this group to that overall roadmap effort as, as GSI and HDR develop more information. Had a good talk with Ronan about kind of this presentation and this effort and getting both of us on the same page as far as, best ways forward. And then I just wanted to open it up for, are there any other goals that you guys see me helping with or focus in priorities where you've been like, we really just need somebody who can help with funding and this is what we need them to do? Any big picture stuff like that?
Do I have any questions?
I mean, I think funding is really important for you to focus on, honestly.
Do you ever do any legislation?
I'm not a lobbyist per se, but I help with state capital requests and with federal earmark requests a good bit. I'm more on I try to stay kind of a step back and highlight, local leaders to kind of be that communication with either the state reps or the federal reps. But I'm the one behind the scenes, and Tamara and I have done a couple of these where, I'll put together the application, work with engineers and technical folks on the scopes of work. And then if that funding is awarded, go through all the steps of EPA or whoever it is that awarded the funds to actually get them out the door and spent.
I guess in my question, why I asked that question is our, how we are limited to spend those funds that we're getting, maybe not the grant funds, but the federal and state funds. If we put something together that said, maybe we don't have to spend it on, just municipal system instead of a private system. I don't know what that would look like, but I'm just throwing that out there.
I think it's really important to try to, scope out and define these projects as early as possible because you can get stuck. It's possible to make changes to some of these earmark requests, but it's also best to stick to, it may just be a sentence or two that described the efforts. And if you veer too far away from that, it can take an act of Congress just to change the project. So that's why I'm really what I want to do with this effort is encourage us to kind of look at a blank slate and say, all right, let's pick, a couple different project priorities and then move those forward through the process. So you don't get stuck with, a federal earmark for a couple $1 million, but it was for the wrong thing, right? And then you have to go back behind and fix all that. There is some flexibility like we found with the Oregon project that was originally a Morrow County project, and now it's going to evolve into an Oregon project. But sometimes you don't get that flexibility. So it's kind of case by case.
Nick, I'll just add, for context, Nick, was very helpful when Morrow County, almost 3 years ago now, applied for the original congressional direct spending, and then he helped with the second and then also the third. So he doesn't come to this, as a newcomer, and I have worked with Nick in Morrow County and at the city of Umatilla, and he's very good about helping us guide projects that match funding, and sometimes either or both of those have to be modified. And I think we're at the point where we'd like to fund some projects, but we haven't completely defined projects either.
I think that's why I asked, it was about the money that's going to Oregon. And then it said we had to go ask for permission to do that. I guess when we wrote it, did we not write it for that? I don't know. I've never seen it, so I don't.
Oh,
even.
We can sure share that, what the original request was, and then got what you.
Sure, yeah, I can explain briefly. So the original application was for Morrow County drinking water. And it was pretty vague. It was intended to be a follow-on to the roadmap project right now. So really what ended up happening is the roadmap project got us further than we anticipated being when that second bunch of money would kick in. So in the discussions with the county and with Oregon and with all the parties involved, it was the original application was going to do like 10% engineering and engagement with Boardman and Oregon to try to push some of these solutions forward, but a lot of that's already being done or has been done in the process of fleshing that out with the roadmap project. So then we shifted focus to kind of what's the next thing in the list. of this, huge list of things we need to do, that next thing in the list. And part of the focus was going to be on Irrigan. It was also going to be on Boardman. So it kept it within the spirit of the application to focus on Irrigan. And what they need is more water. They're going to provide more clean water. They're going to provide water to new customers. Their system needs more water. So the focus is, let's find more water, let's develop more water and get that as far as we can with the money we have, to where then the next step would be getting money to get it out to the neighborhoods, right? If it's feasible and if it works. So it's this real stepwise sort of thing. But that's where we landed with taking what was going to be more general money to do more engineering and actually putting it towards some solutions. But that did take a technical correction. We had to go to EPA and work with Senator Murphy's office and do some paperwork and whatnot. But, so, yeah.
I just feel like we're putting we're spending money on a well that we don't know if that's what is gonna be the project. If we don't have any outreach, we don't have any buy-in from community members, yet we're spending a lot of money on a well.
Are you talking about the Irrigan project?
Mhm.
Well, the overarching scope, when this initially started and Jessica Keys brought it to our attention that there was a possibility, was to look at providing municipal water, which is treated, highly regulated, to some of these domestic well owners, very generically. Because federal funding doesn't fund projects on privately owned property. There might be other funding, state and local, et cetera, that could fund a private well or a private system. But federal money does not. So the idea was, Boardman has a healthy supply of water and has the water capacity to serve properties that are in the city and beyond. Irrigan does not. Irrigan has a very limited water supply, so that's why that second round of funding, and the second round is 1.89 million.
It's 1.2, but Irrigan's going to kick in a few $500,000 to $800,000 to
Which is
get it further.
a win-win. So we're setting up both of the municipalities in a position that could provide that water. And none of this is going to happen really rapidly. At least that's not how we ever thought about it. I mean, I was ready to call the well drillers and the concrete people a long time ago, but it doesn't work that way when you're talking about grant dollars and federal dollars. So I don't know that there's a downside, because that money could not be spent on, unless the county wanted to drill a well and own a well and purchase some property.
We did go to EPA with the question of whether we could spend this money on private wells, and they said no.
No,
So
yeah.
they said it had to be, these public utilities. And I think one of the things you said is spending the money on the well, we're not sure it'll work. That's exactly why we have to spend the money, is to find out if it will work. Because
Not that it will work, but is it the direction that the project's gonna go? Is it, what do people of Irrigan want to do? Do they want to hook to that well? Or are we just buying Irrigan a new well with money that was somewhat, in my opinion, earmarked for drinking water projects? Irrigan's had a bad, it's not necessarily, I don't know how bad their well is, but their system structure is, been upside down for years. He goes to his distributions and then back to his water tower and has no pressure and has these other issues. And I don't know that I want to spend drinking water money to correct Irrigan's water situation.
So,
But it's not my choice, it's the county's choice, because it's the county's money. I'm just saying, as a member thinking ahead, it's like, it's listening to the feedback that we got from the roadmap project. How many people did want to hook up? Wasn't that great amount of people? So I'm just concerned that we're spending that money without.
So there isn't, so what would be your,
I mean, when do we have to spend it by?
that's right, but it isn't a
well,
infinite amount of time. There is
it both is and it isn't. It's infinite until the feds decide they want the money back. And in this climate, that's one of the reasons why we tried to just find a project and get it committed, is because we were worried that they would simply take the money back, because it had been a while since they had awarded it to us. So the recommendation we got from Senator's office is find something to spend this on, get it committed and start moving it forward.
What year was that awarded? 2020, the first one was in 2021 and the second was in 2022.
Well, when we applied for it, and then, I mean, you don't get
Yeah.
it awarded until
The
another
following
18
year.
months after you
Mhm.
apply for it. I think it was fiscal year 23.
So I think the
22, fiscal year 22, 23, and 24. Or what we applied under.
Yeah, I guess the nitrogen emergency didn't happen until 2022. It was after that, correct? Was this applied for after that? That's what it was.
both of them were applied for after that, so I might have the years wrong. So it was if the emergency was in June of 2022,
Mhm.
the first round that's funding the road map project was applied for in the summer, late, early fall 2022, so it was awarded in 2023, and the next one was the following year. And then we applied again this year, but I don't think, what happened with that one, Matt? We didn't,
Yeah, the third phase.
yeah.
Yeah, it didn't make it through.
And one of the recommendations we got too is if we want to continue to get additional phases, we gotta make
Spend.
progress on the
Mhm.
previous phases.
And it does seem like, I mean, we can debate the merits of that for a long time, but $1.2 million when you're talking about a municipal infrastructure project is not very much money. So, that's why, and we put a lot of effort in to the possibility of a Boardman project because they're in a much better position and they've actually brought a lot of technical tools and support to the table. And, Irrigan's kind of limping along with their water system. Also, one of the meetings, the OHA meeting, and I had to present roaming slides, which was not easy. We had a couple people from Irrigan say, you've been focusing all your attention on Boardman, but those of us in the Irrigan area. So what does that look like? A year from now, Ronan will be presenting his final set of recommendations, which is not one single solution, but multiple ones. So we have these concurrent timelines going on.
Mhm. We hear the same thing about the people that live out farther.
Uh-huh.
We're hearing the same bounce back. It's like,
Well, and the,
Gotta start somewhere though.
that's exactly right, yeah.
I get that, but they don't get that. It's,
So some of the questions you have, I think will get kind of sussed out as to why some of this has been developed the way that it has, especially with existing public water systems. It's really important that, right now there are two public water systems, Irrigan and Boardman. I'm not aware of any other public water systems between Irrigan and Boardman. Most of the money here that's available is for public water systems. So in order to even access much of the money that we could use to fund projects outside of the reach of the Irrigan and Boardman public water systems, there will have to be another system created. There's not an entity that exists that could even receive money. The consortium couldn't receive money to build a public water system that doesn't exist. You have to create that from the ground up. So part of that is also what I'm hoping to get through all this process is if that is the priority, to opt to work on some of these areas that are outside of the reach of Irrigan and Boardman. How can the consortium help? How do you structure it? How do you structure the entity that provides the water? Who maintains and operates that water system? Is there a district? Is there a co-op? And then all of the things that have to happen to even make that happen before you apply for the grant, before you define the project. I mean, there's just so many things kind of moving in parallel, but the low hanging fruit is providing more water from existing city systems to people that don't have it versus putting all these pieces together.
So the options in that scenario would be if Morrow County wanted to own and operate a water system,
Mhm.
or if someone wants to develop a municipal water district outside of the.
and those are, on our list of
Mhm.
things to consider, but it just seemed like to me that we jumped into this really, really prematurely and decided to have anyway without But that's the way it feels to me. I don't know. It's not up to this consortium. It's
That's
just,
right, yeah.
it's up to the county and, they've already, kind of earmarked that. But as far as, public input, again, very little.
So, well, I don't know if we want to tell us a little bit more about the Irrigan project.
Sure, I like how the eyes came down the table. So it's to study and analyze the feasibility of a new well or changes to the city's existing wells to increase the supply of clean water. So, whether that's changing the configuration of the wells they have, whether it's drilling a new well at the existing location, at a new location, all of that has to be defined by hydrogeologists that are people who study the water in the ground and how it moves through the rocks, and they try to take a guess at the right place. And then you spend the money to go look in the ground to see what you find in the ground. But then you have to define whether it's the correct quality and the correct quantity to actually help the system, right? Maybe you have a lot of it, but it's full of nitrates. Maybe it's perfectly clean, but there's not a lot of it. So you don't know until you try. And I think it's just as important to define if that's impossible for your to do, if it's infeasible for them to provide more clean water, then that's a pretty huge piece of information for you guys, because now one of these two kind of pillar public water systems is not an option to provide water to these outlying areas. Or you figure out that it is, and now they're moving towards that. They're upgrading their mainline water supply to accommodate this additional volume. And all that just, it takes a long time to go through each of these sort of feasibility steps, right? Where to put the well, will the well work, how to make the well a permanent well, how to get the water to the city system. And then that's just this first piece. And then it's, okay, how much and how do we get it out to all these neighborhoods?
So basically, the 1.2 that we're giving them isn't drilling the well. It's doing the feasibility studies.
The engineers are working on all of that, but
How much of that goes to engineering? How much of that actually goes to the water supply? I mean. Do we have that?
it's in process. I was meeting with the engineers, and
So how do we know it's
this
enough
week.
money to fulfill that project?
it's enough money to get something done.
We do have some engineering costs that were developed on that, show the test feasibility well. We're hoping to be able to have that drilled and then can drill a permanent well in place if the test well works out. And so there's a breakdown of that. I can pull that up for discussion, but
That's all gonna
part
change, so we shouldn't
Yeah.
even look at
Okay,
it. Now that we actually have an engineer providing a scope of work, right, that's when the vagueness gets specified, right? And they start digging into, we need to do this engineering analysis first. We need to hire a hydrogeologist, and then these are our best options forward. But they're putting that together.
I know that they were looking at sport property for a while. That's why I'm asking where this is going, how this is gonna work, because that property is still really not up for consideration yet.
Who was
getting
looking for
pretty
port property? Who was looking for port property?
City of Irrigan was
City of
looking
Irrigan.
at the Northwest partner,
Oh, that's still the CDA land.
yes,
Mhm.
for a reservoir or a well, I believe.
And that's close to their existing reservoir.
Well, he was talking on the 640, but we were trying to
know.
convince him on the
I know.
other corner.
well,
So-
and Irrigan does have some different water projects that they have going on. The ones that would be up in the CD areas are not the ones that we're looking to do with this one. And in order to get this all switched off, we will, the Morrow County will be having an IGA to kind of coordinate and specify things with Irrigan as we finalize the agreements on.
So this is different than what they're looking at?
There's a couple different features that Irrigan's looking at.
And I would just say, I think by next month, and when Aaron is here, would maybe be, you can get a lot more answers. Because the engineers are working on it right now to answer some of the questions that I can't answer. And that Aaron can't answer, because the engineers are just finally scoping out the project. And really digging into what it's gonna look like, and what phase one looks like, and what phase two looks like, and what these costs are gonna look like. And I can't speak to all of his different plans and what he's talked to you about, so.
So Aaron's hiring the engineers right now?
That with putting over the funds over to the city of Aragon, that puts them in charge of doing the purchasing and procurement. That's part of it. Reduces some of the administrative purposes or processes from the county side and helps us streamline things. So that was part of the technical correction that the county did.
Other questions, Nick?
All right, let's go to the next slide, what we're trying to fund. So I assume it's public and private water infrastructure. I just wanted to put a note in there about sewer. I know there have been discussions about putting water and sewer in together. I just wanted to flag, whether I should be looking at water and sewer or just water. It's not super important right now.
For this one, I would say it's water. Sewers, creates too much regulatory issues. We can only do it under the UGBs. And this group has a specific goal in mind. That works.
So as far as capital projects, there's some very low level details from HDR and GSI that have given us these sort of cost estimates of just the Oregon and the Boardman extensions. The total effort being probably, $40–50 million plus for this whole region. And that's without defining what the costs might be to help out these private well owners, right, that can't be reached by the public water systems. So obviously in the long term, the projects will be more than just public water system extensions, but right now there's not the information to dig too far into exactly what the solutions are. And as far as my perspective, Ronan and the group are working on putting all that together. And he said probably first quarter of next year, and kind of when we get done with this effort, will be a good time to marry up my efforts and his efforts and start looking at what might be some possible fundings for, the best solutions for these private connections that can't be reached by the public water systems. All right, let's go to the next one. And this, I just kind of want to just highlight how big these projects are. If you've seen the map, there's a lot of pipe that goes a lot of places. And it's a lot of length of pipe, but that is really where you have opportunities for phasing, especially when it comes to water distribution systems. If you put one pipe in, you put another pipe in, you put another pipe in, you connect one house, you connect the next house, you connect the next house. So it can be a very linear project in a process. And where Ronan and GSI and HDR and my efforts will all kind of combine is trying to figure out what the right size of a phase one would be for some of these projects, right? And the Oregon project is probably phase A1. Even before we can decide if we can get water out to the neighborhoods, we got to decide if we have the water, right? So that's the first step in their process. And Boardman obviously is further along. They don't need as much of that, step of, do we have enough water? Do we need a new well? Where can we put the new well? So that's going to be the biggest area where we can really get some successes, and no one's going to fund a $30 million grant, most likely. I mean, I won't say no one, I won't say it's impossible, but it'd be a very difficult lift to get the state or the feds to just drop $30 million on this one project and get it all done at once. So it's probably the most likely and feasible way for it to move forward is going to be in chunks, over many years to get to where you're looking to get, unless the money really rains down.
Did, what Michigan's water ever get solved?
I'm not entirely sure.
Cause I'm wondering if that might be a model. Of if it, whether it was all plopped down at once, phased, whatever happened.
That is just a totally different situation because it created national headlines and it was all everybody was concerned about, and there was, money appropriated specific, not even a part of, as part of like the earmark process, but specifically to Flint. And they had just, the problem is they essentially ruined their whole system by changing the pH levels of so it was a whole system replacement, and what they had to go through was.
No, I know the details are different, but I'm saying bad water in community is the same. I mean, to the extent that from that right to about there. So I'm wondering if, you can say, well, the details were different. They had lead or whatever, and we got nitrates,
Mhm.
but and maybe we don't have the national coverage that they do and so forth, but
I mean, I think
anything you could learn from that of how that was funded.
I mean, I think what we're
Or did it
already
get
kind of,
funded? I don't know, did they ever fix it?
I don't know if it's fixed.
I don't either.
I heard that it was supposed to get fixed and then it wasn't fixed,
Yeah,
but that
that's
was a
what I-
couple years ago.
Yeah.
But I do think they got that money from the legislature, right, from the federal government, and I think our local senators are taking this on and they are earmarking us what they can. But I don't know how big Flint, Michigan is, but isn't it a couple million people?
80,000.
Oh, just 80,000? Okay.
So the city has met the state and federal standards for lead in drinking water for 13 consecutive monitoring periods.
I guess something
But
happened.
they
guess
had,
that's a
they,
success.
and I was just reading a little bit, they've replaced a lot of pipe, et cetera. So they're still working on, and that's 15 plus years ago.
Mhm.
I think the problem that we're gonna run into too, especially with federal money, is we're seeing this in Iowa and we're seeing it in Washington and we're seeing it all over the country. And everybody's going to be applying for those. I mean, everybody's having the same issues everywhere. Iowa just had a huge, meeting of 600 people, and they're in the same boat we are.
I mean, maybe that's what makes it a national issue, right? Is
Yeah.
nitrates become the next thing before we have to deal with the microplastics or
Yeah.
whatever it is that
Right.
comes next.
Yeah.
So let's go to the next slide, and this is just a real shallow dive into different kinds of money. Some of the different rules and regulations that go along with them, grants with no loan component, that's just 100% free money. You don't have to pay it back. Then there are multiple kinds of loans. There's loans with subsidized rates. There's loans with principal forgiveness. Principal forgiveness means it's basically like a grant, but it's a grant back against the principal that you borrowed. So say you borrowed 4 million, you get a principal forgiveness of 2 million. So then really you're only having to pay back the $2 million. That's a loan, and then the 2 million that's principal forgiveness is treated like a grant. Then there's donations and in kind, all the different sort of funds that might come through the Clean Water Consortium from local businesses or industries or whatever those kind of different streams might be. And then capitalized revolving loan fund. And this is one I want to dig into more in a second, because I think it'll be really helpful for some of these private issues. So let's go to the next slide. So grant funding, you've got small grants like technical assistance grants. I think the county has received a couple of those, primarily to do engineering work. And, $50,000 when it comes to designing an engineering project to extend water is not a lot. I mean, they need about 10% of construction just to design it. So it's usually, on a $10 million project, it's going to be $1 million in engineering to get that just designed. So then one of the other big pots of money, and this is the community development block grants. I've written, I think, 20 or 25 of these successfully this is the main part of my business is getting these community development block grants for small communities. You can receive $2.5 million max every 5 to 7 years. But the catch is that it depends on the low to moderate income of the people that you're serving. So, with some of these weird geographic kind of units that we'd be forming, it's not
Like
the city.
Focus areas of the, of the.
Yeah, the focus areas of the outreach, like say for Irrigan, they have surveys of the city limits and of the UGB, but now you're gonna add on like this, area down here that's maybe hasn't been surveyed, or for West Glen, an area outside of Boardman that may not be a part of their numbers.
It
So you-
was, if I can just interrupt, that's what Umatilla did for Power City, when it was that area inside the urban growth boundary, failing water system, took, city had an idea, those landowners said, no, 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 and then we just kept meeting with them, and so, once they agreed, then, the city hired Portland State University, it has to be a team of folks, and did the income survey in order to show that that neighborhood, that area, that Power City area would qualify for CDBG, and then Nick helped with that next step.
Yeah, I think what they did is, I think it was the whole city, and they added in Power City and Brownell maybe later. Or I think they included Power City, and then later we had to include Brownell.
We had to carve out, I mean, just, I
Yeah.
don't remember the.
But the
sequence,
idea is
but
you have to
carve out
prove
one.
that this whole universe of people that you're serving is over 51% low to moderate
Low to
income. The idea is you're primarily helping residential, and you're primarily helping people that have low to moderate incomes. But in order to get block grants for these kind of projects, they are going to have to be income surveys. So that is one area where I think the consortium can be helpful, is in kind of front running some of these grant opportunities where, $10,000, $15,000 for an income survey can be kind of a non-starter for a lot of communities. But if, the consortium was to say, we're going to pay for the income survey,
Mhm.
we're going to get this set up, and then maybe it's a hit, maybe it's not.
Oops.
And then the
Um.
community's not on the hook for that work and having to pay it back, but it sets you up to potentially get a large chunk of money. So another one, that can provide a lot of grant, but it has to be the right fit with the right administration priorities and the right grant opportunities, is the Economic Development Administration. They have in the past provided public works funding, but it's not what they're focused on right now. We go to this next one. So this was, I think, a question earlier about lobbying, and really the other big source of grants that I go to a lot are state and federal earmarks. So the county has received a bunch of these from both the state and the feds. With the congressionally directed spending and community initiated projects. We route those through the federal legislature. Our local Jessica Keys is the aide that really takes that on for our area. And then it has to go through multiple political steps. Projects are typically $1 to $4 million. They can be bigger, especially and that would be where I think kind of the political capital angle of like the next Flint, that's where you put that pressure and that leverage is this won't happen without earmarks. We need a lot of money to start tackling some of these projects. And there just aren't Oregon state grants that are going to provide, more than a couple $1 million. So the state capital requests also in that same bucket. And I think that's what you guys got the West Glen money from, right? The state capital requests. So those can be a little larger in size. There's a lot of money the state has spent on infrastructure projects lately because they're simply getting so expensive. It's really hard, especially for small communities, to even figure out how to build a new wastewater treatment plant, without charging $200 a month for sewer service. Any questions so far? Okay. All right, loan options. just to kind of give you a real high level, there's market rate commercial loans, 9+%. You've got subsidized loans that are loan rates under market. So it's like the Business Oregon Water Wastewater Special Public Works Fund. Sometimes those can come with small levels of principal forgiveness, but it's usually like $500,000. It's not anything big. And then, so typically, kind of the way I go through funding a lot of these large infrastructure projects is we start with block grant. That's a good $2.5 million to put towards it. Then we're going to go to the state and the feds and ask for earmarks for the project. And then we're going to go, then the next best option is the Clean Water Revolving, DEQ's Clean Water Revolving Fund and the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, which are these EPA basically funds the state to loan out revolving dollars. And those come with, those can come with some large principal forgiveness. So say on a drinking water project of $6 million, it could be up to a $3 million grant. So when you combine, a decent drinking water loan and grant with a block grant with a federal earmark, you can start putting together a couple multi-millions of dollars. And then let's talk about
What is BIL?
bipartisan infrastructure law.
Oh.
So that there's special principal forgiveness through like 27 or 28, but then that's special. Usually it's only $500,000 of principal forgiveness, but through the bipartisan infrastructure law, it can be up to $3 million for drinking water projects.
Now, generally, these loans are taken out with or to an entity that can show a specific revenue source on there. With Clean Water Consortium, we don't have outside the Boardman County one, we don't have a specific revenue source. So would this be pretty much isolated to if we were to create a water district or something like that, or
Yes,
would these be used in our situation?
the drinking water revolving fund has to go to a public water system. So, and yes, as a part of the underwriting process, I don't have some of the scary numbers in here about how much these loans would cost. That's in the next presentation. But yeah, it becomes very unaffordable very fast to put this loan burden on the ratepayers, these new ratepayers, because even outside of Boardman and Oregon, there simply aren't enough connections. They're not dense enough, and the expense is high. So the dollar per connection is very high. And then to also say, well, we can give you water, but it's going to be $150 a month. But no one wants that. I mean, it's not a great pitch. So that's where I kind of want everyone to understand what are options, what are not options, because I feel like that really informs almost through just elimination of where we go, and what are the feasible competitive options for funding. Let's go to the next one. So this is what I think might be one of the more creative approaches that the consortium could take, a capitalized revolving loan. So the idea is that you would be able to take federal funds or state funds, and there are a couple different programs that have tried to do this. Some have just piloted it, some continue to operate, but you would take this public entity, you would capitalize it with a couple $1 million, and then that loan fund would be administered by the consortium of the county or whatever that public entity is. And you would either loan or grant the funds to private homeowners. So you would have them come to you and say, I'd like to do a well rehab. Here's the budget, here's the costs. And then essentially this entity that has this revolving loan fund would work directly with those individuals. And maybe they would have to provide you with like invoices and stuff to get reimbursed, or the rules vary, but the pros are that you can work on privately owned infrastructure. The cons are that you essentially have to have a underwriting and loan administration team that's either a consultant or works, for the public entity managing all of this, because it's a lot of little projects, and every little homeowner and project, you have to run down and make sure that you're meeting all of these, federal or state requirements. But that's one area where I think with administrative capacity, you could get around some of the restrictions on using federal money for these private landowners.
Do you have an example of, like a community who's set up this revolving loan fund for like individual privately owned infrastructure water systems?
No, I can look that up and see who are some of the awardees in the past to some of these.
Infrastructure, but definitely businesses and things.
Businesses,
We-
yeah.
We have help, yeah, that is our fingertips.
Yeah, but the money, this would be money that would pass through a revolving loan fund staff to, from our organization, but it would come from DEQ, EPA, USDA, et cetera, right?
Yeah, but whatever happens to be the fit of what you want to do with the money, because there also are some funds set up to abandon old wells
Uh-huh.
or convert septic tanks, or there's some small niches of money specifically targeted at privately owned infrastructure. But a lot of it's sewer related, so we're gonna have to find the water one, right? And find the right program that works for the solution. So that's where this is kind of an idea of maybe somewhere we could go, but then we're gonna need Ronan to come in a couple months and say, here are some of the best ways we could actually help these areas. And then I go back to the drawing board of, do those fit, some of these options?
It'll be an iterative process. Is it Craft 3 set up to do this kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think they do some of that too. I think they do some.
For sewer,
septic.
no, for
Yeah.
septic systems.
Mhm.
And it's income based. You can set up really whatever standards unless there's ties to the.
Right, you may have to do like income eligibility for the, the people that want to receive the funds. And that will all depend on whoever it is that's, has capitalized the revolving loan fund. Maybe it's grants for low income, low interest loans for higher income, and so that's one nifty option. So when we come to funding considerations of, actually putting in grant applications, and these are some of the things that once I've got some direction from you guys, that I can start going through some of these issues and essentially running down project feasibility with funding, like a funding feasibility study is what I call it. But there's different application cycles. We've got our changing federal landscape, where some things are underfunded, some things are eliminated, some new opportunities are coming up, but they haven't actually been rolled out yet. Lately the state priorities are new housing, but they did sprinkle a good bit of money on some infrastructure projects this last cycle. And then the eligibility of the project, the geography, the demographics of who you're serving, the type of project, whether it's planning, design, or construction, who owns the infrastructure to be built. And then as a last kind of a pretty big thing is, the area residents that you're building this infrastructure for have to buy in and consent to connecting. And so when we worked, as Tamara said, with Power City and Brownell, city staff went out before Business Oregon would grant us our construction money. They wanted some sort of, what percentage of people in this area are actually interested in connecting. So we put together what we called the hookup plan. And it was basically, here's what we're doing. We're putting these water lines. Here's what your rates would be if you annex into the city or if you don't annex into the city. And then this is your one opportunity to waive system development charges. So they basically said, if you hook up within the first year or two, it's free. And after that, it's going to be, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, whatever it is. And the way the city set that up is it's basically just one fund paying another fund for these system development charges. But that was also an issue that came up with the Power City project, because it's all federal money that we're using to build the whole system. But then every single residence needs these service laterals that are gonna leave the right of way and go to the houses. So how do you fund that, even as a part of a larger federal infrastructure project? You still have to have that piece of it figured out, or that's just a really easy way for people to not connect. You know, they have their well in their backyard, or they can pay $5,000. So that can be a pretty big burden.
What was driving the Power City water system? Was it polluted drinking water?
Both quantity and quality. And do you remember driving by Power City and seeing that big storage tank?
Oh,
I wouldn't wash my pets with that water. I mean,
There's-
it to be pretty bad.
There's like a tar lining in that tank that
Mhm.
has been out of compliance for like 50 years.
Yeah,
They
but they
also-
didn't have an alternative.
Yeah.
And they very stubbornly said, we don't want anything to do with the city for decades. And it took that long for those residents to finally say, okay, city,
meanwhile, they were drinking the water though.
or bringing in their own
Okay,
water.
okay.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And it,
And there is some irrigation ditches that come through, so that was really just for the potable water.
and I think what happened too with Power City is they hired their own engineer to try to figure out what it would look like for them to fix it themselves. And it was just so, it was millions of dollars. And they don't, just like this situation, they don't have a lot of ratepayers to divvy out that loan across, 20, 30 homes.
Is Power City an incorporated city?
No, it's unincorporated and it's inside the
So they don't have a,
revenue source.
It
That's
was,
right. It's really, yeah,
It was a water co-op, basically.
Mhm.
That was.
kind
that
of a
was
water
running it.
district, but it's a classic case of what happens. I mean, when it was built 50 years ago, great intentions, really active landowners. You skip a generation and all those people are gone and there's nobody there to maintain the system. And it was really based on volunteers. There was a sweet little lady who would write checks to people who would service it. It kind of fell apart.
Who was driving the mandate to get it done? DQ?
No, actually, a public water system, if I get this right, is regulated by the Drinking Water Division of the Oregon Health Authority and the Public Utility Commission, because it's a public utility. And they were threatened to be shut down for years and years, but these folks didn't have an alternative.
Oh,
So the regulatory entity said, okay, they just let it
okay.
pass.
They were the ones that were saying, it wasn't a grassroots effort, it was the state said, you
Oh.
have to get this done.
No, I think.
Well, what
it
happened
was
is
a little bit of both.
3 or 4 years ago, there was a huge drought and their whole water system failed and they didn't have any water. So that was when we were kind of on the precipice of putting all this together, and then their system completely failed. So during the summer, like a month or two of the summer, and I think it depends on how hot and how much of a drought there is, but they lose all their water. So the city was for free trucking water into them.
Yeah.
So that was part of what really pushed them to embrace this project, but also the city had to do a huge outreach with zoning issues because they wanted to keep their livestock.
Mhm.
So the city had to create a special zone that if
Mhm.
they annexed, they would still be able to keep their livestock. So that's where like these big picture ideas really run up against like
Yeah,
You know,
I was trying
Bob
to
and
think,
Donna who want to keep their goats.
you say,
Yeah.
they did this, and who is they? If it's not, if there isn't a city,
So the city of Umatilla had to work with the residents of Power
so
City.
somehow they of Power City organized somehow.
No, Tamara and I organized them.
Oh, okay, okay, I just wanted to get.
We said, come to a meeting where we talk about water options and
Okay.
that. And basically the pitch was the city is spending its block grant allotment to try to get you water. And it was,
You
I mean-
created the they,
yeah.
okay.
And it didn't go well the first couple of meetings.
No.
We don't want anything to do with you. And the funny thing, cost was not the biggest factor. Initially, it became that they wanted to keep their critters and none of the city zones allowed it. So the city created, I mean, that happened, but finished after I was out of there, but little overlay zone that if you're in the Power City area, as long as the current landowners are there, you can have your, couple cows or sheep or goats or whatever you want.
But if it continued to just be in the urban growth boundary and not become
City
part of the
limits.
city, would you have to do that? If it's in the urban growth boundary, do you need to worry about someone's codes? Or do you have to change the zoning?
It was yeah, I think in that example, no, you wouldn't have to. But I do think the city said, because, and it evolved over time and it was back and forth, open discussion with those residents. Over time, they said, look, we're gonna put a lot of capital into this project and we're gonna put this much capital. I do think they required annexation. didn't
Well,
they?
no, the rates are just twice as much. if they
Oh,
don't annex.
that's what they did then. Okay.
Or it's quite a bit higher of a premium to use water and not be.
And
annexed.
Umatilla has several neighborhoods where they provide water. And where those people don't want to annex, they double the rate. That's right. I forgot about that. That's right.
And we don't have any idea what our two cities would want to do in terms of
So,
percentage.
City of Boardman, without turning around and asking for a direct answer, has been working on a
Realize you got
study.
two council people back
Yes.
there.
They've been working on a study and that they'll be finalizing, the recommendations. They do have an out of district rate. One of the things that will have to be considered is, a lot of times when you have an out of district rate, you're covering the cost of the infrastructure. And so, for this kind of instance, for a proposed connection in West Lynn, we're looking to have that infrastructure developed. They would just have the cost of maintaining it as it's dedicated to them. And so those are things that they have to consider as they look into it. Other ones, would be hoping to be able to provide the same thing, whether it's in Irrigan or Estegard or other areas that are impacted by the nitrates. So we're hoping to hear that, before the final community meeting. We might have some preliminary stuff right before this next one, but I don't want to shove through things without us being able to mill through it and make sure it's all good.
You said maybe community?
Yes. Well, a couple different ways. I mean, if it was dedicated to the city, that's the city would possibly maintain it. If it's created with a special water district, then the water district's in charge of maintaining it. They could contract with the city of Boardman or city of Arion, whoever it's connected to. So there's a couple different ways. If it's county run, which my commissioners have told me not to do that so much, we would have to create or contract with it in some way. I don't believe in, I mean, one of the reasons why, to kind of go back to your earlier question, why the emphasis on connecting the municipal system, it's just to reduce duplication of services in a lot of ways. If you got a running water system with knowledgeable people there, we don't want to have to recreate that and duplicate reservoirs and all those other things. But I mean, those are all just options as we look into things. So I'm looking forward to having some good discussions with Brandon over the next 2-3 weeks as their study gets completed.
Some cookies.
Yeah,
You know, and when it comes to getting the buy-in too from the local folks, you really have to get pretty far in the process before you can get that buy-in. I mean, I feel like if, you know, as a homeowner, if, you know, a new water service comes to me, I want to know all the costs, all the details, and you don't know that until you've gone through final design and you've defined some of these things. So and you also don't want to like kind of exhaust these people, right? With like 5-6 meetings over 2 or 3 years where you're saying, well, do you guys still want to hook up now? Do you still want to hook up now? Do you still want to hook up now? You want there to kind of be a good mesh of all the information they need, and you ask them in a form where you can document that really well for the people who want to give you the money, right? But that's what they want to see too. The feds or the state or whoever, they want to know that they build a system and then people are going to connect to it. They don't want there just to be pipes in the ground that aren't doing anything. And you can only get so close to that, right? I mean, you're not necessarily going to get a legal binding contract with every homeowner before you even put the pipe in the ground. But you can educate them, you can get them on board, you can set you know, this is what it's going to look like, this is what it's going to cost, this is how we're going to deal with the system development charge of how we get the pipe to your house, you know, and then have them give an indication if they're interested. That's how we did it in Power City. I think it worked pretty well.
In the meantime, there's a lot of questions in the community about what this group is doing.
Mhm.
We've been, we put out the, stating the information that, isn't what you're talking about. So it kind of keeps it,
Mhm.
and we need to be able, I think, I'm hopeful that there's some leadership there to say, there's a direction and there's a clear path of what those steps are. They can be communicated to people in the North ordinance sometimes, fairly soon, but even if it's doing all this research,
Mhm.
right, you don't want to say this is what it is and you don't have the facts. But coming out with something that's really clear.
Which is really why you have to start spending the money that you have to get the engineering, get design costs. So you know what that in rate to a user would be. You can't get there without spending that money to do it. I have questions. I'm intrigued about setting up the capitalization fund, because that could be funded by someone other than the state or federal. agency.
Yeah.
State or federal funding, so let's all think about that when we're sitting at, enterprise zone meetings and SIP meetings, and I'm being very serious about that. The next thing that the DEQ Clean Water, revolving loan fund, that's, cities are eligible. We have one of those right now. I mean, we've got 50 million. We're starting out with a contract for 2 million, which will have 1.2 million. Relieved by the state, so that's great, but all of us are able to be an applicant to that fund, correct?
I don't know that the consortium is,
No.
and the
Sorry.
clean water is
Sorry.
sewer, so it'd be
Sorry.
drinking water that we, that's state revolving. The safe drinking water revolving.
So city, county,
Public water system operator, that is who is eligible to apply for the safe drinking water revolving loan.
So that would be city.
County would not be a public water system operator in that context.
got it,
Right.
okay.
Mhm. At this point,
He said, he told you no.
I'm not looking to get into that job. At this point, it's a no.
Okay. Well, obviously, we gotta get the hurdles taken out one at a time.
Mhm.
And start figuring out what the actual cost will be, and I do believe, I guess I've got faith that we're going to get to those community meetings and be able to sit and talk to people about the options of giving them safe drinking water from a pipeline that's going down the middle of the street or not. So I get that there's lots of neighborhoods other than the concentrated ones that we will have to look at money for developing, a deeper well, helping people with that kind of funding. There's lots of things that we need to just keep talking about, but
Well, case in point, I mean, the figures that, we're developing for West Glen's probably the most economic and affordable solution to fix. Estegard, less people, more distance. It's gonna be 2 or 3 times the cost to do it, to run the pipe and get all the connections. So, I mean, as
which
we
could
look at
very
it,
well be looking at individual wells and.
Yes.
and
and setting it up, and, some of those properties are, a little more affluent, so maybe it's just setting up this revolving thing to separate it out a little bit and make it easier.
And they're not gonna qualify for too much of the low income.
Yeah.
If we did the
Mhm.
college study
Right.
things, they're not gonna fit in that group.
So, I mean, setting these things up with the idea that we want clean drinking water for everyone. And looking at exhausting all the options that we have and can look at.
What was all your question? You looked like you had a list.
I
Okay.
just think.
All right, I'm almost done, and then you guys can discuss.
You're ahead of us.
On the next, there we go.
Okay.
So this is, when we get all on the same page of, here are some of our options, here are the best options, we have to identify the engineering needs. Cause I'm pretty useless without an engineer. I need them to tell me what's the solution, what does it cost, where is it going, what is it, what are we doing? Is it a new tower, is it new lines, is it new wells? So I talked to Ronan a good bit about that, and the whole idea here is that I kind of front run some funding information, and then we marry that up in Q1 with tying into the roadmap and geographic priorities. And hopefully by then you guys can tell me, we want you to focus on a case study, a feasibility study of this kind of solution out in these areas. Because that's really where it's going to start. The private infrastructure part of it is going to be the most complicated, and it's going to take some time of talking to all these different funding agencies and just asking them how can we get creative? How can we get to yes? And it may just be no. And then we scratch that one off the list and go to the next one.
Well, probably, when you say we make a decision on the outlying areas and so forth, a big part of our decision is gonna come from you. Where's the money gonna come from? I mean, we can say, yeah, we like this engineering deal, I like that, right? Is that a fair statement or not?
Yes and no. It kind of goes back and forth. Because I need Ronan and his group to tell me what is even the project.
Right.
Before
Now,
I
you're
can-
gonna have a project, but if
Yep.
you bring a project to us and go, you like this project, one of the big factors in deciding whether we want to go will come from, is the funding,
Yes.
where's the funding gonna come from?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm gonna, as much as I can with some of the limited details, I'm gonna try to find some of those options. And then when Ronan has more details, then we'll, bash our heads together a little more and see what comes out.
Yeah.
And that's really where the sizing of the projects comes into, is, we know what the engineering needs are, we know where the geographic priority is, and then I can say, here's what your funding options are. And then that's where we size the project and we phase it and we say, okay, we're gonna tackle $1 million here, or we're gonna tackle a $500,000 project here with, this neighborhood here. And I have the easy job. I don't envy you guys having to decide who gets to go first. I mean, that's where this really gets tricky, because you can't help every single person in this area at the same time. And even just the looking, it's gonna help for me to know, depending on the demographics of the area will depend on what money could go to them, right? So it's all this back and forth, but I think it'll be a little more organic.
Well, if you have a road now, and you're working in this area and somebody else says, hey, what about me? That roadmap, you're gonna be able to tell that person, hey, you're on the list at this point, this time. Because when I've talked to people, it's been, when are you gonna start this? I would think that maybe once the roadmap is finished, that's gonna give everybody a picture to talk to people where we're going.
Yeah, and the hope too is that we kind of develop these case studies, these methodologies of, once we've figured out how to fund, say, a new well for a local improvement district, that's, if that's where it ends up, once we've done that once, it's going to be fairly easy to repeat it, right? We'll have learned so much through that process, even just the, getting it set up and going through those feasibility steps. That's my hope, is we kind of dive in deep with, 3 or 4 different kinds of projects, figure out all of our options, and then prioritize. Because some of this stuff, like with the federal earmarks, you'll have to pick a priority. They may not fund 4 different projects all in the same geographic area at one time. So you may have to say, this one's the priority, we want to go for this, or, so there'll be a good bit of that, I think.
Yes, that's why I questioned our spending money in Weirton, because I thought our priority focus was Westland. But thought that was something that we had already pushed forward.
I'm glad you raised that, Kelly, because I don't know that we've ever officially done that as a CWC. I think as county staff and the Board of Commissioners said, we hear the public, and I was super impressed with the board that they made this decision well over a year ago, and they said, we know we're doing this bi-county roadmap project. but West Glen, in terms of, proximity to the city, the, density of the housing and the levels of nitrate, it seems like low hanging fruit. So go forth, staff, and see what you can do. That was a huge leadership decision. And nothing's happened in Umatilla County, remember? But they never said, do that at the expense of ignoring everything else. But it's a vast amount. There's how many hundred of exempt wells, Rona might know, in Morrow County alone with high nitrate levels, it's several hundred. We can't be everything to everybody, but I don't mean to rattle on, but I don't think this group as a policy matter has said, we're focusing on that at the expense of everything else. And we've always said, and in my mind, and every time I do a presentation or hear Ronan or Matt or somebody else, the board has authorized us to pursue funding, engineering. I mean, Matt's administering 2 different grants that does the preliminary engineering because we're so close. And we did get this earmark, but not at the expense of everybody else. And if the people in West Glen with the Rev work that Matt's doing, and Rev is the engagement group, if they say we don't want it, then we'll have to go to another neighborhood. But it is so much, in terms of being able to extend a municipal infrastructure, that's very feasible within a short period of time, a couple of years. None of those other areas really are without significant design, capital, et cetera.
But didn't we spend the $20,000 for Westland for the
Engineering feasibility.
engineering feasibility, and then we spent the other 15 for an outreach program for Westland, and now all of a sudden it seems like we're
The
just.
county did.
Yeah, it seems like we're just shifting gears.
Well, there's also the state funding for West Glen, right?
Mhm.
And I don't know much about that project, but that's part of why the federal earmark got shifted to Oregon, because the state was giving money directly to the West Glen side of things. So it wasn't that if it wasn't for those state funds going towards West Glen and all of this other money that the county has gotten for West Glen, that's pushed them forward,
Mhm.
you know, where we originally were with this 1.2 million, West Glen's gotten out here and Oregon's still back here. It hasn't moved forward at all with their side of things. So knowing that now West Glen has another batch of money that's coming in, you know, another year or two to continue that process. That's why, you know, it
Still
was-
not enough to really do
I
a
don't
project.
know. I think
So if
very
we
close.
continue to split it, everything, we're never gonna get any one project in. We're gonna, seems like we're everywhere.
But we have to know what the costs are. And
Yeah.
there's no way to know what the costs are without getting through the engineering to know what the opportunities are for Erie
Right,
to
right.
go
And that's where I thought we spent the money on Westland.
of their boundaries, and we're doing
And
that.
I'm not advocating for one or the other. I just want to know where we're focusing on going.
I think my point was, I don't think we have a single focus, and maybe that's what. Maybe at a subsequent consortium meeting, we could talk about what those priorities are. In my mind, West Glen, what I just said, but also the roadmap project it'll wrap up in a year, and they'll tell us what specific options, you know, a shopping list or a list of solutions for individual neighborhoods, what they call focus areas in that project. And there are a lot of outlier areas that that EPA grant just won't cover everybody.
And go through the list of your CDS dollars.
The first
phase
one
one
was
is this
2 point.
well testing, basically what's going, and the roadmap.
The
what's
roadmap
going
project.
on the bike lane.
That was what, almost $3 million, 2.89,
Yeah.
2.89. And then the second one was 1.2.
Mhm.
And the second one is Morrow County only, because Umatilla County didn't want to be involved. They
Also because
had
we had
another priority for their congressional direct spending
And we
request.
had to apply for a different pot of money. The first phase is through EPA research. So it's not,
And that's where we were directed when the congressional staff came and said,
and it's good
yeah.
because we were able to go to 2 different EPA arms, basically. And the first arm is a research division, and that's why it's a lot of research, right? Why they had to do the QAP
the quality
Like
assurance
that,
protocol.
that's all in like the, you know,
That
it's,
was on CD1.
yeah,
C1.
CDS
Mhm.
one. And then for CDS two, this is going through water infrastructure department, right? So we need to be doing engineering and building things. So that's part of the difference too in the focus with those two batches as well.
And 3 is in the queue.
It's in the queue, but that's
sounds like you
great,
got
right, Matt?
Yeah, it didn't make it through. but
Okay, okay, so,
We got our notes.
well, we can try again.
Absolutely.
But I mean, I think one of Nick's messages that I'm hearing tonight is, don't look to the federal government for all your funding needs. And particularly where you have outliers that aren't clustered together and really the only long-term permanent solution is something on an individual piece of property. It's gonna be really difficult to find. It's pretty much impossible to use federal money for that, difficult to find state and others. So I love the way you're talking about other funding that might come through Morrow County that could be earmarked for something like that. And then you have the business and industry who's already funding and has funded, water systems.
We'll go back to the revolving fund that you were talking about. Would that be a mechanism where you could get private money?
Mhm.
And just say, okay, you wouldn't have to say, okay, it's this specific project. Because when you go for a federal grant, you lay out a project,
Mhm.
you lay out, okay, you have a revolving fund, you can say it's to provide. Better
It could-
wells in this
Yeah.
area,
Mhm.
then you could take the funds in. And much more flexibility, just like Lisa was saying.
Well, I mean, some of it's gonna depend on where it comes from and, whether you can intermingle and commingle all this money from different sources into the same fund, like, that's another thing where I don't know the answer. And it's gonna, to create essentially an infrastructure bank is beyond my specialty, but we can connect with those people, right? If I can find the money and then, but part of the, what we need to do now is figuring out how would we even do that?
Mhm.
I don't know. And would these rules apply? How flexible could it be? Can you intermingle all this money? Do you have to maybe say, okay, we brought in $1 million from the federal government for this specific area and then direct staff, make sure this bucket of money doesn't touch this stuff over here. I mean, it gets pretty complicated pretty fast because you essentially create a bank.
That we were talking about the budget. Remember when we said, how are we gonna make sure that if we get that kind of money and it goes here, and this side to go to municipal, and if we get this bucket of money, that it could go to the outliers and. But would a nonprofit ever work better? To funnel money through a nonprofit somehow?
Well, there are some nonprofits that fund this stuff, like, I mean, but it's also just such a burden to, you'd have to have a pretty big staff as a nonprofit to take on working with 50 or 70 members. It's definitely a full-time job or depending on how big it gets and managing all the money in a very detailed way.
It'd almost be, you'd be a bank.
Mhm.
You'd be a loan officer.
Yeah.
And I've actually managed some of those rotating fund programs in other municipalities, and we would have to have a bank involved or some kind of financial institution to make sure as we go through, and especially if it's a revolving loan, how that's taken care of. But it's doable. It's just there's hoops to jump through.
And actually, I think his next step, I think the questions you're asking, Kelly, really are in sync with what Nick is saying.
Yeah, I
in
mean,
terms of next steps.
When I get to the end of my second presentation, you will know pretty much everything that we can learn in a slideshow. And we have to start moving towards like, what do you want me to look at? What do you want me to research? What projects? Give me 3 or 4 and tell me what to do. So that's really where I'm going to depend on you guys to tell me what are the priorities and, is it 1, 2, 3, 4 these and, is it Westland? Is it Irrigan? Is it these private areas? Is it 3 or 4 different private areas? Is it a local improvement district? Like, and not to say that it can't change, the priorities can't shift over time, but we got to start somewhere. And I only have so much time. So I want to put it towards learning as much as we can about things that are the most important, the fastest, and understanding that ultimately this is a decade long or more process. It's not gonna be quick.
Probably the sooner you could get that going, the better, right?
Yeah, I mean,
I mean,
As we were talking contracts, he's like, when can I start talking? When can I start
I've
talking?
been under contract for a month or less, I think, so.
He was online 2 meetings ago, ready to talk, and
Yeah,
we didn't have him under contract yet.
Well, I only have 2 columns on my funding, and one is public system and one is private party, so
mhm.
that's really it.
Yeah,
Minus,
2 sides of the budget.
just not.
Not, what about like a special district, if a cluster of landowners, would that?
Here, let's go to the next
Okay.
slide, because we're
That's
talking
it,
about
okay.
exactly what is on the next slide. So,
Okay.
I'll call it the case study concept. Private, extending existing public systems, new public systems, and then any other ideas. But there's really only 3 kinds of projects. You're gonna create a new public system, you're gonna extend an existing one, or you're gonna leave it in the hands of each homeowner. So I mean, yes, I can start looking into that kind of stuff now. Really the private one is the tricky one. So that's gonna be where I might say, okay, we've got this small batch of money over here. But what are we doing for these private homeowners? Is it a well rehab? Is it a filter? How much do those cost? And then once we start putting those in some buckets and seeing how big these projects might be, then it can come to, okay, GSI's run down the feasibility, it'll work. Here's how much it'll cost, and then we're writing grant applications. So.
Do you like the grant applications or again, someone on the team?
I've got a group of 4 people, but most of what we do is just write grants. So, but I'll be the point person on this one.
Part of your show.
Mhm.
And it's a pretty iterative process. Cause he needs information from us, and then he'll say, I don't see any options for that, so go back to the table and you kind of carve it again, and then he goes back, and that's.
This is also a very different sort of relationship and structure than usually, this is a city or a district that has a list of projects and a capital improvement plan, and they have already prioritized them, and they know the cost, they know how it impacts the system, or that's the first step is to do the engineering. But this is much more complicated and also reaches a step of, this body prioritizing its time. Whereas a city doesn't really have to do that. The city's priorities are the city and what's inside the city. And that isn't a discussion that most of the time with these infrastructure projects I have to have. I mean, sometimes it is because a lot of cities have a lot of problems. We gotta say, well, which neighborhood gets the new pipes first?
And just for clarification, our current contract with Dakota Consulting includes grant exploration, identifying funding resources, consulting with us on which ones to go, and grant applications. We didn't capture the grant management, which is something to do, but since we don't have grants at that point, we figured for the first year, let's get them out applying. And when we renew the contract or whatnot, that would encompass it, however we're staffed at that time.
You talked about that, private wells and the concern about some people in certain neighborhoods wouldn't qualify because of their income to be able to get a well paced or.
It just depends.
But that's a hurdle.
There could be with these, some of these like capitalized revolving funds,
Yeah.
the funder wants you to do income checks before you give that money out. So as a part of the application from the landowner, they might also provide like their tax statement with like their adjusted gross income or something, or they may have to sign it and say what it was. And then you determine their eligibility just as a person and as a homeowner. And then you get into all the project documents and.
That might be a hurdle
Mhm.
for people who don't want to disclose that or for
Yep.
whatever
It's,
reason.
it's the biggest obstacle in CDBG grants. is people not willing to write down how much they make a year.
The same with the income surveys, because
Your tax-
people knock on your door or call your house and they say, you know, I'm with whoever and we're doing this income survey and to, you know, to determine whether this area is eligible for federal benefits, and we need to know what your household size is and what your adjusted gross income was.
And unfortunately, it used to be where you could have a range. People were much more comfortable. Now it's like, what's your adjustable?
When units are electric, it's pretty generous first, right, for energy type things and insulation at home and, you know, that's based on what kind of unit.
Some of those
So
subsidy
maybe
programs,
there's-
yeah.
Maybe there's the ones that you. Or units are electric, so.
But they're a co-op, they have all kinds of latitude, they're not using, I don't think they're using federal dollars, although at one point in time they did get a federal grant to replace old mobile homes. But I don't know if they still use it for them. I mean, it's a great idea to learn by somebody who's already done it, but they're not. Yeah. I think.
Community development block grants, is that just city or county?
It can be city, county,
Okay.
you can pass through to nonprofits, it can be fairly flexible.
And
As
there's
long as the group, as long as the area qualifies, then we can.
And there's a limit on how many, the number a jurisdiction can have at any given time, right? It used to be two.
Yeah, I think there's two, you know, open up. And you also can only get $20,000 per residential connection. So that's another limitation with that
Oh.
bunch of money. So if you're only helping, so like I worked with the city of Monument and they have 80 houses, so they can only get 1.6 or something. They can't get their full 2.5 million allocation because there's not enough residences to make up that. Yeah, at least I guess 125 to meet the full 2.5 million.
I mean, Brandon, you haven't been through that yet, right?
Law grant. Yeah, I was on the council, right?
Property tax.
For the CDC. Yeah. That's a lot of work.
Mhm.
And would it be an option for someone, maybe like East Yard or something, would there be an option for people to combine one well, or is that gonna be like? It's never happened?
I could see there could be an option for it. I mean, it's something we should look at, but administratively, it adds a lot of hurdles and uncertainty.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing, with the money that's been appropriated for Westland from the state right now. So pretty nice, you know, we got it, we put it in work. So definitely it's an option, but it creates a lot of hurdles to get that, those income surveys. Which is nice because it's part of the average, but it's.
Has to be done by a grant state university, doesn't it?
Well, you just have to have an independent third party, so RCAC does them and Portland State does them. I recommend Portland State, just 'cause that's what they do.
Yeah.
I worked with Debbie a lot. over the last
What
10
was the
years.
other place that you said?
RCAC, the
Rural.
Community Assistant, Rural Community Assistance Corporation, I think, maybe, or whatever you
Yeah,
said.
they work a lot with the concept.
Oh, they do? RCAC does.
It's granting. Loans.
So yeah, the last slide is just what's the role of the consortium in funding and, you know, strategizing projects, so. You guys at least have a good bit to think about from this, hopefully. We'll talk about it more next month.
So will you be at the community meeting or?
I haven't been asked so far. I mean, I can be if it would be helpful for me to attend some of those.
Right now, we've got Webb and Myers Architectural Engineering who's attending those. Who's been doing feasibility studies, so, yeah, so.
When are they?
Next one's on the 27th, Boardman Elementary. And then, October 1st. Is the third one. First,
Where is that?
Sandbox,
Is that the senior center?
Boardman.
Oh, Sanborn, okay.
And Myers doing the engineering for sewer and water. Oh, both.
There were two separate grants from business owner. Not having a good time reporting on this. Yeah. They don't just say, here's some, take care of it.
That's all I have to
That
say.
wraps it up? Okay, oh, that's a
now.
lot, that's
For
very
now.
good, very good presentation, man, that's great, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much,
I'm glad to get it out. It's been rattling around my head since April, so.
yeah, all right, good to see you. All right, next up would be our procurement policy, that's Matthew.
So, we've attached a, proposed, resolution, that kind of, finalizes in some of the discussions we've had in the past on public contracting rules and procedures. What this does is kind of following the format that the Port of Morrow does, is adopts the state's, procurement directions with some modifications that specifically allow us for personal services and engineering and such, the services and such. The resolution was prepared and reviewed with comments from Eileen, our legal counsel, and prepares a fairly straightforward adaptation and in a concise manner. Part of this is sets up the professional services, as can be seen on the Exhibit A, Section B, which allows us to do professional services and items up for engineering up to $100,000 without going to a competitive bid process. Does include codification of the CWC manager's authority of $25,000 for public contracts in that way, and it generally follows the expectations that have been discussed in the past. Small procurements can be made not related to the architectural and engineering without competitive bidding up to 25,000, which mirrors the state requirements. Anything from 25 to 250 requires at least three informal bids, which would be written, and public improvements are based from 25 to $100,000 in the same way with three bids. Any public improvements, which is generally what we'd be looking at for any of the projects that we run, anything over $100,000 would have to be posted with formal bids.
That's Tuesday, I'm sorry.
So we're hopeful that the board has had a chance to review this a little bit. We do have a clause in here for emergency contracts and disposal of surplus property. I'm not too worried about those. It's not like we're providing services, and hopefully we don't accrue a bunch of surplus property as the CWC. We're looking to just do projects and put them in and get them into place, and whether that's putting it into cities, a public water system of whatever structure, I don't imagine us holding on to a lot of property in a long-term kind of basis. Any questions or comments or concerns about the proposed resolution? Be happy to discuss.
In the state, in the county board for doing the work.
There could be, you know, contracted areas on that. We got to just be conscious about that, because well, if you hit a certain point, then you know, we have to track that time and basis on a different level. Generally, as we talked with the board on some other projects, they're busy. And the city, I don't know how much, I mean, they do a lot of maintenance, but actual installation, that generally contract out. You don't lay water lines in that, do you?
No, not very often.
Yeah. So generally it'd probably be the port, my public works group with the county. We know how to put, you know, culverts in, but water systems we're not certified for.
Pulling up the road,
Potentially, but just coordination, it might be easier just to contract that and have the general contractor take it, coordinate and all that, rather than looking to have other entities come in. we'll always look to ways to stretch the buck, but
Mhm.
I don't want to slow down projects in order to coordinate them unless it really, pencils out.
And typically, state or federal money is not gonna pay a public entity to do work either. You know, you can do it for free, but they're not gonna reimburse your time.
Mhm.
Some of them do, but it's pretty rare.
Could be seen as, well, I don't even know how it works, especially with the CWC. So, yeah, it could be, there could be some challenges to it. So,
And we do that kind of work, but for like both state, federal dollars, we just have to make sure that we're below cost. And to approve, we have to provide a statement for the low cost on work, but
there's a specific way. You almost have to
obviously,
pay their
if there's
bid.
in-kind work that the court can do, as long as it's approved and on a schedule, our crews are very capable. As well as engineering when needed.
I'll take that from you, honestly.
We are looking for a GIS. So are we looking for a motion now?
Please.
I would move that we adopt the public contracting rules and procedures as presented.
There a second,
I'll second that.
second, further discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Thanks, and thanks for having, is it Elaine or Eileen? Eileen. Thanks,
Eileen Akins.
Because she's great. Yeah, good.
Okay, next up would be the director's report.
All right, some of these things we've already touched on, but we'll briefly touch on again. West Glen Technical Study, and I bring these things up, not all of these are specifically CWC items, but they impact the clean water goals that we're looking at. And so while some of these are county initiatives, I do want to just keep this board apprised of it. The West Glen Technical Study community outreach meeting is August 27th, 6 p.m. And I actually have it here as October 2nd on this. That's a new typo.
It's different than what you said. I
Yeah.
was like, okay, I don't know if that's what I had.
Let me just pull up the note cards that are going out and make sure. Yeah, it's the first one is the 27th and the second one is October 1st. So please forgive my my mistype on that. So we have the West Glen Technical Study, myself, a representative from Rev and a translator are going out through the community tomorrow night, or sorry, Thursday night. We're hoping to have two groups to go out there. Both will have a Spanish translator available. And we're just going to go out with some information in personal invites to go through the community there. We have postcards that are being mailed out tomorrow as well, just making sure we have an invitation on that. And we'll be discussing our first meeting. We didn't have assurances on the state funding, so that's one of the big items. We have additional funding, and we're just talking about some of those options that are entailed with that. So looking forward to that. The technical study, we've seen a draft of that. That'll be finalized in the next 2 weeks. And so once that's done, we'd be happy to share that with this group. So by the next monthly meeting, hopefully we can just distribute that to you all so you can have copies of that. The OHA community meetings, Clean Water Consortium had representation there. We had our own Tamara Mabbitt present and be present for those. The one in Boardman was very well attended with several people from West Glen who hadn't been involved in any public meetings before. And so it was good. And even I attended the one over in Hermiston on the 31st. And just let you know, a lot more people at the Boardman one than at the Hermiston one. It's definitely a more hot topic in Morrow County than over there. So good presentations though, by Joe and Tamara. Very well done on that aspect. We've made comments and had discussions about the CDS Phase 2 funding, $1.32 million. Really big issue is developing that infrastructure. So it provides additional options on the east side of the Lobaguama within Morrow County. Budget discussion, just to let you know, that's still being worked on. We anticipate that we'll be able to provide documentation and get notifications so we can take care of that in our meeting in September. And so those are some of the items that we've been working on. And the Westland Technical Study has been a huge emphasis that's related to the Clean Water Consortium. And quite frankly, while it's a county thing now, the actual project will be a Clean Water Consortium item. The money from the state legislator is going to Morrow County for the Clean Water Consortium. So it's just a kickstand before this body gets that. So we'll be looking into that and getting some additional information on when those funds will actually be available. So, and where we can go with that. That's what we have for this last month. I do appreciate, I mean, Ronan has been online. I appreciate Nick. Both of them, I have to say, are very invested and good partners and contractors for the Clean Water Consortium. They've been good with the county and other entities, but both of them are excited to work with this body. I do appreciate the efforts they do, and a little bit of the hurting on me. They'll reach out, hey, we need to get this. And so good set of contractors, and I appreciate what they bring to the table and look forward to getting more and more information to this board based on their recommendations. Any questions as far as the report?
The postcards are going out. Who are they going out to?
So these are going out to all residents within the West Glen community, which also includes what all.
It goes out to Paul Smith Road
Yeah.
on the west and just abutting properties, I think,
Yeah.
on the east
So everything from Wilson
to the canal.
to the canal.
a
And
little
actually
bit
those
below the
7
canal.
properties below the canal that are
Who will
accessible.
you be going to for?
As many of those as we can. We're gonna start in the West Glen actual area. We'll break up into 2 groups, go throughout those, and then we'll try to get the other road on the west.
And these community member meetings are they publicized outside of those two areas?
We're putting it on our website and that, but it's specifically for the community. We aren't turning people away. But it is specifically to engage and answer questions from those community members that will be impacted by this proposed project.
Okay, so this is nothing to do with hearing.
No, this one doesn't.
Project,
No.
that's different. That'd be different.
This is specific community outreach for a project.
Any other questions on that?
I have a question. Back to the Erie, the 1.32 million for Erie thing, do they have a timeline on using those things?
No, the engineer is still scoping it all out, figuring out how many steps. Of course, the engineers always wanna, take 3 steps further back to make sure they've got all the right planning information before they just jump in to throw in a well in the ground. So they're putting it together. Hopefully Aaron's able to make the next meeting, and he also have a lot by then. Sure that-
One more question. Because I'm sick. The wells that people are currently using and considering deepening those. Are you getting any feel for what the cost of that is?
I'm not, no.
I'm gonna guess it's around 25,000. I know Pat Suter had his looked at. I don't know how deep that was going down to, and it's gonna depend on where you got
They're all going to have to be individually, but, I do know someone that spent 20,000 doing
Yeah.
that.
How deep, and it's usually based on lineal feed.
I may have a copy of that.
I'm guessing they're going to about 3.36.
So they're like the secondary basalt.
Yeah.
And hopefully they're casing them, because right now OWRD does not have a casing standard, believe it or not, in a groundwater management area, they don't impose. But it has evolved over time. But there's no guarantee that, the well drilling construction standards have evolved over time, but
So those are the things, kind of the things that maybe legislation helps us
Uh-huh.
with, or plan, or,
Yeah.
you know, planning.
It could be planning, but good lord, your planning department involved with well construction is
I know,
is like a
But,
nightmare.
but that's, that's where we're at,
Mhm.
I agree.
State
They're
is
pulling,
the-
they're out there pulling wells, pulling pumps out of wells as we speak today. To check their casings and, these people are doing it through Oregon Water Resources and, it's happening right today. So they're going in and looking at their casings and.
And if I
Yeah,
go back to my
water
little two options here, we've got private and we got public.
Mhm.
And we should be continuing to think about both of them
Mhm.
at the same
Yeah.
time. And if there is an ability, I'm really intrigued about setting up a revolving. What that might be able to do. for
And having,
private,
yeah,
well.
Yeah. I like that idea, and having very, imposing standards, like if you need to meet certain standards if you're going to deepen it.
Yeah, we,
So we're not cross-contaminating, that's been happening over the past couple of decades.
Well, and I understand that we somehow we've got to talk about septic systems and those improvements and what the funding opportunities are.
Mhm.
I mean,
Did they ever get more funding for that? Was anybody know?
The craft three program,
Yeah.
I'm told there's money in that fund, and it's income-based. So if your septic system's working,
So DEQ ran
you don't really want to mess with it.
DEQ ran a program to get grants to decommission septic systems. So Aaron and I actually applied for one in Erie because he has a weird sewer system that they have these septic systems hooked up to the conventional sewer system. So they have to go through and convert them. And I worked with them on that maybe 10 years ago now, but it's still a continuing issue. So we applied for some of that money for him. But some of those programs kind of came out of like the lead stuff, and they came out of the lead service lines and the copper rule, the lead and copper rule. And a lot of that was driven by the last administration. So it's going to be whether the funds continue to go to that.
No, they were out for a while. I don't know if it would be, another thing we're out. Yeah.
I mean, you go to write the grant, you're putting together, so much of information, so somebody, DC or some. Is that public information, is that information other people could use to support what you're doing or write a letter or?
I mean, I assume anything I do for this body is a public record, so it can be, can be requested and can be shared. If you guys want to, so. None of it's my property.
and several grants do letters of support, community support letters.
Mhm.
I know when the CDS phase goes through, it seems like it's just suddenly a race, like everybody's writing letters for everybody.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can come in with these and get a little more lead time on them and plan a little more ahead for different groups, industries, or even just residents. So.
Sure, there's one thought I wanted to share if folks didn't know, but Robin candidate's not here, but I want to share information on a program she's working on in partnership with Umatilla County. Umatilla County's had a well health inspection program for a few years, and we recently, Morrow County contracted with them, and that's available to residents in Morrow County, so people can call. I don't have any of the information right now, except that it's a program, and it would be really great if particularly the outlier folks, they'll come out, it takes them an hour or two, they'll look at your well. They'll tell you things like, you don't really want to store your farm chemicals next to your well, things like that, or look at separation between the well and the septic and give them some ideas of things to do. It's sort of like an energy audit, but it's a well audit, and Robin could tell us maybe how that's going.
Who provides that access?
Umatilla County has now 3 or 4 sanitarians that can do septic inspections. So it's part of the Umatilla County Environmental Health Program.
Wow.
I know, Robin talked about it at her presentation to the board. Maybe, yeah, or we could ask Robin to send us a flyer, we could circulate it to this group. I don't know how much the word's getting out on that, but
Are you saying that we have the program in Morrow County?
yes, by contracting with Umatilla County to do that.
Who's paying for that?
County.
Was it pass-through money or is it county general fund money? I
Well,
don't
that's,
remember.
I don't remember.
I don't remember either. But honestly, I would love as a planner I mean, the new development that happens, I think we provide them with a lot of information, but I'd love to say, hey, y'all, before you decide where you want to put your well and your septic in your house, I mean, we have those site plans. Some of them are really clear and detailed and some of the old ones aren't. Some of the new ones really aren't, frankly, but I'd love to say, consult with somebody who looks at how you manage your farm property, because it's your rural property that's outside of city limits.
Don't they do that when they approve the septic systems and the wells?
They have,
When Bryce did his, he had to do so many folks,
Yeah,
so many
they
feet
do.
away and.
but some of that other stuff they don't. OSU Extension used to have a home assist, HOME-A-SYST, and a farm assist program where they would send people, it really came out of Corvallis, but they'd send people out to say, you need to be careful how you manage your property. You don't want to have a bunch of cows because the people improving your septic system are not going to tell you not to have cows there. And plenty of people do, or have them close to your well.
Yeah, they'll grow the trees right over your septic.
Right, exactly right. Yeah, that's right. And we had to rip out the industry when we bought our house, for a replacement drain field that wasn't properly placed, but, and it is expensive.
And I know Umatilla County also doesn't really have records on septic systems earlier than
Right.
75 or something. I mean,
Right.
because I think we went through and requested records on septic systems in Power City and Brownell. And they were like, well, we've got about 60% of the records. Here's
Well,
what we
DEQ
have.
DEQ used to purge them because, it used to, all that permitting went through DEQ, and about, I was at Umatilla County, we assumed the program, so it went over to environmental health, so it's a local program. I think it works well. I do want to share, we spent a bunch of time last meeting talking about wells on parcels. I rallied the troops in my office and they rose to the occasion. We have like 80% of them in this West Glen area, and we dug the deeds. We looked through deeds, that does not tell you which parcel has a well, particularly older parcels.
I
both
think we were
plan-
talking about shared wells when we were looking on the deeds, if they were shared, that's
Yeah,
usually on your deed.
And
But
that's
if
not
it's-
always recorded. So they found the majority of the information. We ended up not, mostly I just gotta be part of the discussion, but they pulled a lot of deeds and they also pulled information. We literally went through all of our property files for all those parcels out there. And I mean, some of them for an individual parcel might have papers this thick, and said, where can we find a site plan? And we could connect the dots, and Clint is a very methodical thinker, and so is Steven, so we shared that. And then Ronan's team, we've collaborated with them. If Ronan's still on the phone, I want to say we have like 80% of that data on a map now. So that's information that Matt and Grace will take to the next West End meeting, because there were some residents who said they didn't even know where their well was located. It was
Anna Maria.
Anna Maria said that, so we do, anyway, I'm pretty pleased with the outcome of just rolling up our sleeves and figuring out what we had. It's kind of fun research, actually.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. That's
Okay.
why we don't ever throw away papers in our office, because it is forever. I have pulled things from like the early 70s and somebody's like, I knew that was on there, and it's, well, eventually we'll scan it and it'll be digitized, but that's gonna take a long time. We have like a row of file cabinets with that kind of information, so. Yep.
You need another intern.
Our interns are starting to do that, actually. Yes, we are getting, I'm starting September sometime. Yeah. If people want to see that, but it's mostly a tool that Matt and Grace can take to that meeting, and then GSI has it. And the Meyer architecture has it too. So it's just that next level. I mean, the engineering work that Meyer is doing is like 10% design. So, that's a long way from 100% design, but that information will save the overall project, I think, a fair amount of money, assuming there are some parcels that don't have a well, so you have to assume it's a shared well. So then what to do with that existing well? This meeting, I think the August 26th meeting, Grace has OWRD attending, because I had a lot of questions about what will happen to my existing well. And I don't think that there's a legal ramification or a law that says if you connect to a municipal system, you have to abandon your well, but that needs to be told by OWRD, not somebody from the planning office.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions about water rights compared to domestic residential wells. So we're bringing in someone who can say with the board what the difference is.
So you have official FAQs?
We've got an FAQ that we've had translated with the county in regards to the Westland funding. It answers a bunch of those, but there's still questions, and so it is.
And you were talking about as well, not for the, I understand that there is a number on each well. Is that a part of your records or findings or?
It's not a part of our record, and the newer wells, you can go out and find like a brass cap and it'll tell you what your well number is, and that's tied to OWRD data. And but some of the older wells, and there are hand dug wells that were dug and are utilized before there was ever such thing as a well inspection. So that's why Nick
Did you
said
have
something.
any of that?
We don't have
No.
that. And so Ronan has a guy in his office who's super good with data, and he's been connecting some of those things. Believe it or not, OWD did not have that data, so we've shared it with them. Because they're exempt wells, and by nature, it's not a well that OWD regulates, but they could, because an exempt well allows you to use 20,000 gallons per day, which is a lot for a household. I think the national average size house is more like 5,000 gallons per day. So assuming you're not going to be frugal with your water, and you can irrigate up to a half an hour per well, not per lot. So if you have a shared well,
Half an
Half an
hour.
acre.
half an acre. I know, it's time to go. That's what I'm thinking. It's like dinner time or something. So yes, half an acre. So we're learning things, pulling some pieces together.
Does anybody in the West Point have irrigation rights?
Do they? I don't have that information. So if they have a well, some domestic wells are also irrigation wells. They're out in the country, they are.
Shouldn't be. Your domestic well should be a exempt use and your irrigation well should be, because you'll have an irrigation permit, you go with your well.
Right. But I think there are some that are crossover. No. Well, but if you think about it, an exempt well, so I'm not an expert on that, but an exempt well, you can irrigate up to a half an acre. But if you have another water right, you don't necessarily have to drill a new
Well,
well
it'd be
just for
different at point of
groundwater.
conversion.
Well, if it's surface water, it's different than if
Yes.
it's groundwater. Yeah, right. You wouldn't mix those with surface water like now or something.
Definitely wouldn't think that.
No.
So previously we had talked about if there is a public system going down the street, taking water into a home,
Mhm.
that their existing well would be disconnected from the home.
Yes.
There's a backflow regulation.
Okay, I just want to make sure we keep letting people know that and help them
Right
understand
now,
why that would be, because some people don't know when they turn their water on where that water is coming from.
Sure.
and that's one of the things is, the intent right now, and we have not seen anything which would require us to have people cap wells. Umatilla County, Hermiston City is requiring that as a good faith participation. But we have not received anything saying if we provide city water, that their wells have to be kept, and that's not our intent. And, so we're working that and providing connection. They'll have to disconnect from the house, so there's no mixing, even with the backflow preventer. we're providing lower nitrate water, we don't want to mix in with high nitrate water.
Well, then I don't think we would want to regulate them or cap their well.
No.
I guess we need to make sure that their drinking water faucets have safe.
I think that was something that was coming through the legislation piece that didn't go through, but it was on there.
1154.
Yeah, it did say, you know, in that piece of legislation, so there's always that to think about as well, not just, but our rules are, or what we're going to require, what is the state going to require, in the future? Because water is becoming scarce and they're gonna start, you know,
And is there concern about piping, or, you know, household piping, and clean water, and how do that,
and you have to
water
update
storage.
your backflow devices every 10 years,
So it's that.
5 years.
That's right. So that piping within the system, particularly like older homes. Mhm. What that looks like.
Whose responsibility is that?
And pressure. It's going to be another
Water pressure.
different issue for a lot of households that,
PRVs.
yeah, because they're gonna have, well, you don't, do they have a pressure tank? And all of a sudden, you know, that maybe they have a very weak, small pressure tank, or they have a well that runs consistently, like we just updated ours, so ours runs all the time. The minute we hooked it up, blew everything in our house everywhere because it wasn't ready for that pressure.
The more
So,
modern tank has higher. pressure.
yes.
Put in the city water, do you put fire hydrants and all that stuff too, like?
Our anticipation is we're including fire hydrants for this area. While we're not setting it up for annexation, I just feel, almost a social responsibility. We've got a water system and we put,
Is there also a requirement to have hydrants to flush the system?
that helps.
Um,
Generally, we're trying to make a loop on this, but there will be areas where it dead ends. And so that's the best way to flush it and make sure those little critters that don't grow.
And we're talking to the West Glen folks, like, is there just that. And things that say, this is the good reasons why, you wanna put them.
Come to the meeting on Thursday,
You
27th.
got that?
Well, they put up flyers all around and what concerns might be and telling English and Spanish. And,
That's pretty clear.
yeah, I mean, cost isn't clear, but then they were fixing some things that we questioned and.
The Willamette Partnership also did a study of West Glen, and that's a nonprofit group out of Portland, and they did an evaluation of like 5 different options. And their conclusion is really the only feasible option based on a number of factors: cost, guaranteed long-term viability, et cetera, was connecting to a municipality. That doesn't mean everybody has to agree with their conclusion. And that Willamette Partnership, I attached it to my monthly update a couple of months ago to the board. Is that on our website? I don't know.
If it was in your department update, yeah.
It was in my department update, June or July. Haven't done August yet. But I could share that with anybody who wants one. It was just an independent third party and they said, how can we help? And that it was a non-engineering evaluation. But they were, actually it was by a planner who knows a fair amount about water infrastructure, and that was their conclusion. And Grace has that. I don't know if that's been shared broadly with the West Glen neighborhood.
I haven't seen it.
I mean, I can send that out.
I just, I missed that last meeting, I couldn't attend it. Brandon's doing some kind of study for putting the city water out to West Glen, and someone's doing the engineering to say this is what it's gonna cost, and you're doing the grants to get the money to do all that.
I'm not working on any West Glen money yet, but I could be directed so at any moment. Just let me know
But
if I
is
can
that-
help.
But the
Okay,
2.8
fine.
million from the legislature could be used for West Glen or another community. So if West Glen says we don't want to hook up, them.
As well as the dollars that the board's already.
But what are we waiting?
The
for?
we
What are we
redirected
waiting
through.
for?
To do what? To write grants?
That's right, that's
Yeah.
right, I forgot
Yeah,
about
yeah,
that.
we can't forget that.
No, right.
Well, part of it is we want to reach out with the community. We don't want to stronghand this. There are other options, that, I mean, the city, it's easy to discuss the city one because it's right there, it's accessible and it's cheaper than a community system. The community system is an option, which would take the same cost of infrastructure that we're looking at with the city connection, but then add on anywhere from $3 to $5 million for treatment plant, reservoir and water right acquisition. And so those are things that we are bringing together with the community group to say, here's the skinny. If you don't want to connect to the city, it's this much more. We have this much.
But you're
So,
waiting for Brandon to do something.
that was for the rate study for, how much, because they're looking to update their water rates, which would include looking, they already have an out of city, or out of system water rate. They are looking to review that and, that's what he's looking. And they've been doing studies to bolster their whole system. So that's another study that they're doing. It's, so,
So once the community decides on these options, then you're going to fund, right?
well, on this one, we have some funding in place, ready to pull
You're not
them.
waiting for him.
I'm not waiting for him on this one.
Who's deciding on the options, though? We're doing that with the community.
That's what we're trying to do. We're,
So we all need to be on the same page to know exactly what those options are. So,
so the options are right now, as far as, local reverse osmosis doesn't work with the nitrate levels. Digging wells deeper, funding restrictions on that, plus we don't know if that would be profitable and effective in doing that.
Or
as
if
far
you'll
as-
get low nitrate
Yeah.
water.
Um,
And if you do this year, it might be different 5 years from now.
Yeah.
It's less of a guarantee. That was one of the downsides of just becoming well.
The other two apparent options are a community, water system, special water district, or connecting to a existing water system like the city of Boardman. Those are the two most practical solutions there that our feasibility studies and partners have decided on. And it's come down to a cost question. We believe that because of the proximity to Boardman and the infrastructure for that area, and that will be around that $3 million mark, and that's set up with some inflationary numbers over the next 2 years, to calculate that. Doing a public water system would require more money on that scale. And so that's what we're talking to people. The commitment is we can get the infrastructure in for free this way. If we wanted to do a public system, that's gonna require some either further funding or participation by the neighbors to do that.
Tamara had done some work with GSI or something that on the costs and how many people need to participate or, to pay the city, for water or whatever to make sure that that's part of the rate thing. But say there's 70 homes out there and only 5 of them want to connect. Is that,
That,
something you
if
have
that's
to
the
take
case,
into-
we aren't going there, I
okay?
would say. I can't in good
That'll
conscience
be on
spend
your
$2.8 million
list
for
of
5
things
people.
that This community needs to, push forward on one of these ideas at a certain level, not just 3 people on the end or something.
And that level of participation has not directly been set. I mean, there's other things, creating a special district would require almost 100% approval.
It'd be good for them to know, I think.
Yeah. And,
Well,
you know, and then the other side is kind of like with Power City of saying, we're gonna do this because we need to. And during the first year or during construction, it's a free connection. Otherwise, you're gonna pay $3,000 to $5,000
That's what I
for
was
it later.
gonna say. Get the free connections now, and if you want to
Yeah.
connect in 5 years when you decide your well's not good.
So right now, the plan is There's a curb box at every property there that has a house. Yes.
So if you buy a new home, if someone sell, does that person have to pay that hookup too? Is that gonna be?
I would assume.
If it's not, yeah, because their money might not be there in 5 years, so they're.
Yeah, I would assume.
Watching my time and it was
Okay.
the last meeting.
no, for
Before
sure.
we close out, Ronan, are you still there? Anything you want to kick in a little bit, or? See, a little bit, I kind of limited him there.
I am still here. I was just gonna say, just really good conversations. I appreciate Nick's presentation and information. We kind of reviewed and discussed his content, and I'm looking forward to the working with him and you guys on the recommendations and some of the case studies. I think the case studies approach is a thing that makes sense because it allows Nick to proceed with some solid information from our end in terms of sort of pilot information that can be used to kind of ground the funding options that he's looking at. So we should be able to do that in the next, we've got a couple of workshops in the fall. So like I think Nick mentioned, first quarter of 26, but we'll have information prior to that. To kind of keep him moving. So a lot of good information and yeah, looking forward to it.
Okay, well, thanks for tuning in tonight.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, any other business anybody has to throw out there before we?
I just wanna say, if we're gonna start looking at irrigation, and Nick needs something to do, maybe we should start looking for outreach dollars for irrigation.
So the money we're spending, the 1.3 or 2 or whatever, some of that has to include outreach. So we'll put some outreach into that.
It has to, because otherwise you don't know what a plan might be.
Yeah, and the senator's office also made it clear that it needs to include some public outreach, so it will.
The case study approach a lot, and maybe we could do a case study of one of the roadmaps focus areas in the Irrigan area, like there's a cluster around 8th Street. And that would also include outreach, so Nick could do some work and also include some outreach with that. And that's gonna zap your budget really fast, though, when.
Well,
you
I don't really need to do outreach with the public to do the work that I need to do.
Oh, okay. But then you could do the work and then we could figure out, how to do outreach, maybe hire Rev to do something in the Irrigan area.
Getting the word out about, we talked about.
The well health.
Yeah,
Yeah, we can chat with Robin about it.
that's something we could do.
Yeah, just for people, but people are getting kind of overwhelmed about wells and waters and. We talked about that a year ago, but it's a whole separate, just a professional person coming out looking at the wells, so I don't know what kind of outreach they're doing.
Looking at it, looking at the top of a wellhead or even your pump house is relatively.
Well,
I
some
mean,
people
you
don't
could go
know.
look at my well and you couldn't know if my casing was cracked or my pump fingers had holes in it and I was contaminating 900 feet below
Okay,
where I'm sucking the water out of.
everybody's kind of breaking up, sorry.
Did you guys adjourn the meeting?
Not yet, no, not yet. We want to make sure there wasn't any, one last thing that's really.
That 8th
Be
Street
super
in
important.
Irrigan cluster.
Well, I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting, so.
No.
Oh, no?
I was serious when I said I think we should move to 4 o'clock instead of
Oh, right,
6
okay,
o'clock.
okay.
We haven't gained any more people at 6,
Figure that out.
and we might gain more people at 4 o'clock.
That works for me.
I think
Does
it's
it
a
work
bad
for you?
idea. I just.
We've done nothing at 6 o'clock. Maybe the other people want to go home and have dinner.
Okay, I hear a motion to move to 4.
Well, maybe we got really criticized by certain groups for having it during regular hours. Maybe we should try one more time to have it at 6. Then winter's gonna hit and I don't wanna be out for everybody.
I think for the public. And then
We've had no more public at 6 o'clock. Not having any people. We can't even get our advice. Hey. I just need my point, but. If you wanna do one more,
So I don't know how we get the word out about our meetings. I mean, they're on our website.
Are we getting, are they getting emails for
Who's-
these notifications?
Yes.
That's something everybody's,
Mhm.
our
Oh, that's right.
advisory committee is
Because
getting those.
Advisory committee, interested parties. I've had people ask to be added to my email list, and I've added them. I emailed quite a few people.
all this stuff.
And you're not getting it.
No.
Well,
No.
we can be rules for our advisory committee when they don't show up, if we get new advisory committee members. Maybe we should be thinking about that, because,
Maybe we should ask them what time they're available for you.
yeah, they're probably not getting a doodle like we get.
Yeah.
Okay, so one more shot at 6. Let's go, okay.
Nice work keeping up with all this extra stuff, Valerie.
Okay, so we'll call the meeting adjourned.
Chair gives extra money,